Okay, so at our live session last week and Friday, we ran out of time for a couple of the concepts, so I told you guys I would do a recording and you would have the opportunity for extra credit for taking the Quality Cornell notes for the rest of the session. And so this is that opportunity to have the extra credit. You do need to take Quality Cornell notes using the Cornell note rubric under the doc sharing. As your guide so you can get your full points, because they will be graded even for extra credit. And so the more you can make sure you've met the requirements in the rubric, the better your score is going to be. So take a peek at that before you turn your notes in for the extra credit piece. On Friday, remember our essential question was that although technology can get answers to math problems for us, why do we still need to know how to calculate the answers by hand? And so we're going to do a little bit of review and talk some more about those pieces, because we're going to be using a spreadsheet, which is technology, to help us with our statistics. So kind of keep that in mind, and as we go through, if you need to pause to copy this down, so you have this for your extra credit notes, go ahead and do that now, and then when you're ready, go ahead and push the start button again and our play button, and you can continue right on with me. So here was some of the vocabulary that we talked about at the last lesson. It was box and whisker plot, range, variance, standard deviation, quartiles, frequency distribution. And we actually defined what a couple of these things were during a live lesson, but we didn't get to define a couple of those kinds of things yet. So make sure you have some definitions down in your notes for these and describe what they are, because we're going to need to have that information as we go through and we work through some of the problems. And you're going to need some of this information when you come to the quiz and test as well. Again, if you need to pause here, go ahead and pause and then push play again when you're ready to move on. So, it says, we talked about, again, with some of the statistics pieces, we can use a spreadsheet to help us with those calculations. In the real world, there's always lots of numbers, and there's lots and lots and lots of numbers, so it's hard to calculate them by hand. That would take a lot of time, and the accuracy would be in question on some of these things. So the spreadsheets are very handy for that, and you actually will probably be asked to do something with the spreadsheet as part of your unit test. So if you're not in class learning how to use this, or not taking care to pay attention now and learn how to use a spreadsheet now and try the spreadsheet, then you're probably going to have a struggle on the test, because you are going to be expected to use that as well. So the question says, how can we calculate mean, median, and mode by hand? Or we can calculate by hand, or we can use the spreadsheet to do that and have the spreadsheet kind of be our calculator. But we do have to tell the spreadsheet what we want it to do. Each of you need to choose. I had to remember, everybody choose a number between 1 and 30. I have actually created a new spreadsheet where we chose the numbers where I put numbers on there between 1 and 20. So it adjusted the spreadsheet just a little bit. And then since the numbers are already there, we don't need to worry about the rest of this. And then at the bottom of the spreadsheet, below the numbers, where the numbers are, I ask people to find the mean, and then the median, and the mode. So as I look at this, I'm going to share my spreadsheet with you. So here's the spreadsheet that kind of similar to what we were talking about. And in column A, I put the an ID number for the students that shared a number. And then the next column is the guess that they took. And I called those guesses X, or they would be X sub I. And there's a reason for that we'll see later. And then right below that, I put kind of a long dark line below the number 11 at the bottom there. And then I put the words mean, median, and mode. And I put Q1, Q2, Q3, because remember we talked about the quartiles during the live session. And then we're just at the point where we needed to talk about the variation and standard deviation. And then we would also talk about frequency as well. So, if you remember correctly, to find the mean, everybody told me that you had to add all the numbers together of all the guesses and divide by however many numbers we have. So you can see from the ID numbers that we have 16 numbers altogether. So once we've added it together, we're going to divide by 16. And remember that there's a fast way to get these numbers added up. And so I'm going to click on the cell. Each of the little boxes is called a cell. And I click on the cell next to the word mean. And then I'm going to go over the one that's just below the first. I'm going to go over to where it says, has the sigma sign at the top right. And it says auto sum. So I'm going to tell this that I want to find the sum. You can see also that there is a button to do average, and it will automatically do the average for you of those numbers. However, I want to, on the test, you'll get to use both of those things. You'll have to show me how to get to the average, setting up a formula in the system, and then you can also, right next to it, use the average button to check your answer. So we're going to learn how to put the formula in there. So we're going to do the sum, and you can see there's a place right up here where the cursor is, where it says equals, and then it's saying to add all the cells that are actually being highlighted with the moving piece around it, and it's telling to add all those up. Now that's not the complete version of what we need to do to find the average. That's only the first step. The next thing is we have to divide by the number of cells. So I'm going up in this place where it says f of x, which means the function. We know what function means. It's like your y equals. So it's saying to get the average, you're going to, in this case, because that's what we're trying to find, we're going to, this equals the sum of all those cells. And then I'm going to divide that, and I'm going to use the kind of the fraction bar, the slash backslash to show divide, and I'm going to divide it by the number of items, which is 16. And when I push the equal sign, I end up with what my average or mean is for that system. Now I can do a copy of all of these numbers. I'm going to copy those numbers, and I'm going to put them over here. And we're going to go back and try and check ourselves here, because remember we saw that button under that up in the upper right hand corner. You can see my cursor kind of going around there. That summation sign, which means we're going to add a bunch of stuff together. And I'm just going to click on the word average and see what happens. And it's saying we're going to find the average of everything that's highlighted. Just that around here is where the moving box is. And I'm going to push enter, because that way I know that I'm telling them that I'm done. Then I agree with everything that's there. And we actually get the same thing. So there's two ways to do this. There is the shortcut way of average, but that's going to be used on a test to check your answers. You're going to have to show me that you can use a formula, and that you understand the formula for how to find the mean or average. And I will be able to look at that on your spreadsheet, because I just click on that number, and if I look up at the top here, I can see, you can see where this cursor is, I can see what your formula was, to see that you understand how to find the mean of all those numbers. Okay, so I'm going to delete the ones we just did, and delete those. Okay, and now I need to find the median. And so during the lesson we talked about that the median was, the first thing we had to do was we had to put the numbers in order from smallest to largest for the median, and then we found the number that was exactly in the middle. And so I'm going to actually get these to sort from smallest to largest. I don't have to do it by hand because the spreadsheet will allow me to do that. But before I do that, I have to highlight the numbers that I want. So the first thing I do is where that plus is, I'm going to click on the cell, the very first cell with the numbers I want to sort. Then I'm going to push the shift button down, and move the cursor with the plus down to the last number I want it to sort, and just click, while I'm holding the shift button down, I click on that last button. So now all the numbers that I want to sort are highlighted. And if you go back up to that upper right-hand corner, right by where the summation sign is, the sigma sign is for summation, we used earlier, there's a place next to it that says sort and filter. So we're going to click on that. And you can see it says sort from smallest to largest, sort from largest to smallest, and you can do some custom sort things if you have a lot more kinds of, if you have several kinds of things you're trying to sort. Like let's say you have a bunch of people with the same last name, but so you want to sort by last name first, and several people have, let's say, the last name Smith, and you want to get them then to sort by the first name, so we get those in alphabetical order. Then you can do a custom sort. But we're going to do the smallest to largest, and we want to continue with the current selection, so we're going to click a different button that wasn't there. I'm going to tell it to sort, and it just changed my numbers from smallest to largest. Okay. Now, if I was really doing this correctly, I would have kept my ID numbers with everything, but I just still wanted to keep my 16 up, so I did those 16 there. If I was doing something with some statistics and I had data, ID numbers and stuff, I would have kept the numbers with the guess. But for our purposes today, we don't need to worry about that. So now I'm going to click on the median. So I've got the numbers from smallest to largest, and so I have to find the numbers in the middle. Now we have an issue because we have 16 numbers, and this is something we haven't talked about, so those of you that are doing this for extra credit are getting a little bit extra help on this. And a little reminder, because I know you've talked about how to do this in past years, that we have 8 numbers on one side and 8 numbers on the other side, so there is not a number that's exactly in the middle. So we have to look at the 8th number and the 9th number. And we're lucky enough that the 8th number and the 9th number are exactly the same number. So our middle number then would be 11, and we can just type that in there. If our 8th and 9th number were 2 different numbers, we have to find the average of those 2 numbers. Let's say instead that they were the 11 and the 12, like we were at 9 and 10. If that was the case, we would have to go up here, click on the cell we want to put the equation in, and go up here to our equation area where it says f of x, that's where our equation goes. We'd have to push equals, and then we'd have to tell it what 2 cells, so we just click on the cell, and click on that cell, and then we want to add the other cell. Oops, I forgot one thing. We do need to put this in parentheses because I want to divide the whole thing, the answer for that whole thing, by 2, because we have to find the average of those 2 numbers. So I'm going to push the backslash button for divide, so I am looking like a fraction. I'm going to push 2, and I push equals, and if my 2 numbers with middle numbers were, the 2 numbers on either side of the middle were 11 and 12, then my median would be 11.5 based on our equation. But we know that that's not true. The middle numbers both 11, so we can just type in 11 here. But again, if I give you something where you have to calculate it, I can click on the cell. I can see very quickly in the equation area right up here that whether or not you have calculated when, I can see the equation that you chose. Now, let's go to mode. That's the number that occurs the most. So we can actually look at this and see which number occurs the most. And so on this, I'm going to ask you to look at that and see which one occurs the most. But if we had lots and lots and lots of numbers, like hundreds of numbers, which is sometimes stuff I have had to deal with some of the work I've done, as some jobs that I've had for the district, I wouldn't want to try and figure that out by looking at it like we can right now. I'd want to actually use our spreadsheet to help me out with that. But for right now, we're going to look at this, and I can see very quickly that the number that occurs the most often is the number 6. So I'm going to type the number 6 in there, and then I'm going to copy this again, and I'm going to show you the buttons for median and mode. So we're going to click here so that it's lined up with median. And what I can do is to find the buttons for median and to check myself out, make sure I'm doing this correctly, I can go to Formulas. That's at the top here, up to the top left. Click on Formulas. And we want to insert a function because we need an equation, and the function is our equation. We need to check and see that on the category, because we're doing statistics with this, then we want to look under the statistics categories. So I see a category that says statistical. I'm going to click on that, and you can see that right there you can see the word average, which is a statistical thing. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we don't need to learn about right now. That's something if you go to higher levels of statistics. But there's other things that are still at the levels that we're working with and talking about. So we want median. So I need to find the word median. Up there it is. I'm going to click on the word median, and I'm going to tell it OK. And it's going to ask me to make sure that my numbers are the ones that I want. Well, I want to make sure, and to make sure you've got the numbers you want, you just click on the number at the top that you want, and then hold the Shift key down and click on the number at the bottom, and you'll see that all the numbers are highlighted, and you make sure those are the ones you want. So you can see actually that this, the I-17, we had I-18 there originally, so we had an extra cell we didn't want. So then we can click OK, and it's calculated out the median for us. And I can see that you use the median button because it's in the formula area. So on your calculations where you're supposed to be showing me you understand what median is, I should see an actual number there. On the median button, I can see the equation. So I can see which button, if you're using the button or if you're calculating, and actually I want you to learn how to use both. So now let's talk about mode. Mode we just look at and say, hey, it's 6. But we also have a mode button, and so we're going to go up to Insert Function, click on the mode cell. We want that to go. Insert Function, or we got the Insert Function button. We check to make sure it's statistical, because that's the category we need. We're going to scroll down until we find the word mode. It's coming up right there. And we got mode of multiple numbers. And so we're going to push that, and we're going to push OK. Then we need to tell it what numbers we want to look at. So we're going to, again, click on the first set of numbers in the set that we want. And then we can hold the Shift button down and click on the last button while you're holding the Shift button down, and it highlights everything. And once we've highlighted all the numbers we want to look at for the mode, we're going to push OK. And guess what? It came out of 6, which is exactly what we saw when we looked at it. Okay? So we talked about the buttons that we can use, and we talked about how to do some of these things by hand and what they mean. And then the next thing we're going to do is talk about these little letters. Let's talk about, there's 2 things we want to include in here before those. Let me add a couple of rows here. Okay. And we want, all right. Next thing I want to do is I want to find the quartiles. And the quartiles are the places where your numbers are divided into 4 equal pieces. Okay? So the second quartile, which is Q2, which I just highlighted in dark by clicking on the cell, is actually your median. So I can actually put on here in parentheses your median for the entire set of numbers. And so I can just actually put the number in there right there, but that's 11. Okay? And I can do the same thing for over here, that's 11. Now, to get the first quartile, or the third quartile, what I've got to do is I look at where that division is, and I find the median of the numbers above that division for the first quartile. So I know that right there where that plus is, in between those 2 11s, is where the first quartile is. and the median happens to be 11 there. So I need to find the median now of the numbers above from 1 through 8. So this time I'm going to look at the numbers from 1 through 8. I'm going to just shift and highlight so you can see that. And I need to find the number that's right in the middle. And again, we've got even numbers, so we've got to look at the numbers at 4 and 5, because that's halfway. In between 4 and 5 is halfway, and they're both 6, so I can see that my first quartile number is going to be 6. It also happens to be my mode. But I can also then go over to my numbers and use my button. So I'm going to click on the smallest number. I'm going to click on the last number that I want for that half of the numbers. I'm going to go to my formula. Oops, I forgot to click on here. Okay. So I want to go from here to there just so you can see that. So I'm going to click on my quartile 1. I'm going to click Insert Function. And then I want to find the mode, so I'm going to make sure I'm under Statistical Category, go down to Mode. Excuse me, not Mode, Median. I'm sorry. We're going to go to Median and click on Median. And then I'm going to say OK. And it picked a bunch of numbers for me. It's picked numbers 19, cells I, 19, and 20. So we're in column I, and we've got 19 and 20 as the cell. Those aren't the ones I want. So since those aren't the ones I want, all I need to do is click on the first cell that I do want, and that shows up. And I click on, hold the Shift button down and click on the last cell that I want. And then I have the area, the space that I want to find the median for. So the first quartile is the median of the first half of the numbers. And I'm going to tell it OK. And it came up with the same thing I did by hand. For the third quartile, I'm going to look at the numbers from here to here. And when I look at that, I know we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I look at the first 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, the fourth, and then the number below it. And it just so happens that it worked out nicely. I've got 2 15s on the 2 right surrounding the middle, exact middle of those sets of numbers. So my quartile happens to be 15 for my third quartile. Again, I can go back and I can calculate out, use my button to calculate that out as well. So I'm going to click on my Insert Function button. I check that the category is statistical. I'm going down to find the median. There's median right there. So I'm going to click on median. And again, it doesn't have the, I look at what it says, where it's black right here, where it says number 1. And it's not the right cells. I can't calculate, I'm not calculating the median of the correct thing there, so I need to click on the first one that I want, hold the Shift button down and click on the last one, and it puts the numbers in, the cell numbers in I want it to work with. And I tell it OK, and it says, hey, it's 15, which is exactly what we got before. Okay? Now, the other thing we need to know, and we can kind of look at this, because the numbers are in order, and we can say the minimum number, the smallest number, is the number 4. So I can look at that and say, hey, it's 4. The maximum number is 20 because that's the largest number, so I'm going to click that and type that in there. But I can also have my spreadsheet do that, because if there's lots of numbers and they're not in order, and sometimes you don't want to put them in order, then it will find those smallest and largest numbers for you as you're working through. So let's do that. We click on S of X, Insert. We want statistical because this is still statistical. And we want to scroll down, and I think some of you saw that there is a min, and you can click on that button right there. Tell it OK. Again, it's asking you which cells do you want to figure out the minimum and maximum for. So I click on the cell, that first cell. I hold the Shift button down and click on the last one I want while I'm holding the Shift button down, and then I get the right cells and I tell it OK. And it comes up with the 4 for you, even though we can see it in ours. The same thing with the max. There is a button for that too. So again, if they're not in order and you want to find that really quickly, we can do that. You click on that Insert Function button, the F of X button. Make sure we're in the right category. Scroll down until we find where it says Max, and click on Max, and tell it OK. We're going to pick the cells we want because they're not the ones that we want in the box. So we click on that, hold the Shift key down while you're clicking on the last one that you want, and tell it OK. And it actually tells us the right thing. So again, I can check that you're using the buttons and how you're using the buttons, and I can check to see that you know how to calculate this the way you need to calculate it. All right? So here's the next thing. Let's go back for a second to our PowerPoint, and we're going to do this. So we've talked about the spreadsheet. We've gone through this. We've talked about finding the quartiles. To find the quartiles, you find the median. It splits the set of numbers into two groups, and then you find the median of each of those groups. So the first half of the numbers and the second half of the numbers. The quartiles then are the places that divide the set of numbers into 4 equal groups by definition. So you can add that definition to your vocabulary words. If you want to pause and do that, that would be great. Then push play again. And then it says, what are the quartiles of our data set? And use the spreadsheet to find those. So we just did that. And that's all reviewed from the other day. Now we're going to use that information to create a box and whisker plot. Okay? So it says, how do you set up a box and whisker plot? The first thing you have to do that is find the minimum and maximum numbers of the set of numbers. And this is something that you should have done in 7th grade, so this should just be a refresher. Then you need to find the quartiles for the sets of numbers. So we have already done that. Then we need to draw a number line and place a dot below the minimum, maximum, and quartiles. Once we've done that, we're going to draw a rectangle, and that contains the quartile numbers, and then draw a vertical line through in the rectangle where Q2 is. And we're going to then draw horizontal lines from the ends of the rectangle to the minimum and maximum numbers. So let's look at how that's going to be done. So we're going to go back and forth a little bit here between our spreadsheet and our whiteboard here. So the first thing it said to do was find the quartiles and the minimum and maximum, which we've done. So then after that happened, it said to draw a number line. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to draw a number line and do as best I can to make it straight with this. I know it's not perfect. And once I have that number line, I'm going to go back and check what on my spreadsheet what my numbers are. I'm going to actually bring those over and write those down so we have them. Okay, so as I look at this, I'm going to, I know my first quartile is 6, the second one is 11, and the third one is 15. So let me go back and add those to my whiteboard. So we're going to pause sharing here for a second. And we had 6, 11, and 15 as my quartiles. This is quartile 1, quartile 2, and quartile 3. And as we do that, then we go back to resume sharing. If I look again, then my minimum is 4 and my maximum is 20. So I want to go back to that. So my min was 4, my max was 20. So as I'm doing this, I need a number line that's going to go from probably about 0 to 25. And it's about 20, 15, 10, and 5 here. So I'm going to put some dots like at the next rule back here was to put some dots where the below where the minimum, maximum, and quartiles would go. So let's go back this way and do that. And I'm going to use a different color to do that. So my minimum was 4, so I'm going to put a dot right about here because that's about where the 4 would go. My maximum is 20, so that's right here. My first quartile is 6, so that's going to be right about here. My second quartile is 11, which is right here, and my third quartile is 15, which is right here. So the next step, let's go back and look at, now that I placed the dots, my next step happens to be right here. It says draw the rectangle on, this ends on the Q1, Q3, and vertical, so we're going to do that, and then draw the vertical line through Q2. So we're going to draw these points right here are my quartile numbers, so I'm going to draw a rectangle using those. So this is the end of the rectangle. This is the other end of the rectangle. And then I just draw a vertical line through the second quartile right here like this. Once we've done that, the next step, if we go back, it says draw horizontal lines from the ends of the rectangle to the minimum and maximum. So we're drawing the box right now. For the box and whisker, we've seen the box, and now we're drawing the whiskers. So we're drawing the horizontal lines, and you just put a little bit of a line here. And a horizontal line here, and a little bit of a vertical line here. And now you have a box and whisker plot because you see the box in the middle, the rectangle, and then the whiskers are the lines off the side. And that's how you do a box and whisker plot. So the other thing we needed to talk about and kind of go into is variance. I used the wrong word there. Variance and standard deviation. So these are terms that help us figure out how spread out numbers are in data sets. And there's all in relationship to the mean. And they help people know how accurate results are when they're doing research. So if we're looking at things, we really want a standard deviation that is fairly small if we're doing research, because that tells us that all our results are giving us the same information, and so that's got to be pretty accurate about our predictions and things like that. So as we look at that, it says for this data set, so that's all of our numbers, like the x1, x2, x3, and so on. That's the number 1, 2, 3, and all the way to n is like our ID numbers on the spreadsheet. And so in this case, remember our summation sign is the same. We're going to calculate this part right here, and where this little letter right there represents like the 1, 2, 3, all the way up to the number n. So we're going to calculate this using all the values for x with the ID number 1 through n. And in our case, it'd be 1 through 16. And so to figure out this variance, we call the variance S squared. So we're going to say S squared equals, and our sigma sign summation, where the little letter I, our ID numbers from 1 to n. We're going to calculate this, and I'll show you what that means. This right here means the average for our x values, so our mean, and then we're going to square that. So looking at this, the first thing we have to do is list the data in order, which we've got on our spreadsheet. Then we're going to find the mean. That's what that little thing above the x means, the mean of the x values. And then we're going to calculate the x with each ID number, with each guess, the first guess minus that average, second guess minus the average, and so on, all the way to the last guess, in this case our 16th guess. Then we're going to square those numbers, and then we're going to calculate the summation and use the formula that's right here to figure out our numbers. Okay, so as we do that, let's go to our spreadsheet. Let's go back and look at that piece. And we're going to look at our numbers here, and we're going to actually do that x sub 1 minus the x with the line across the top. And so the x sub I would be like our first, that's like the if it's sub 1, it would be our first guess, our second guess, and so on. And from these numbers, we're going to subtract our mean, which happens to be 10.9375. So I'm going to take, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the equation in here, because remember we want to take, we're going to push equals, because we're going to say like y equals, and so here's our equal sign, and the f of x right here is like our y. And then we have to take our cell right here, and we're going to subtract from that our mean. I'm going to put that right there. Okay? Oops, I didn't want that. Let's try it again. Okay. So now I have the difference between those two numbers. Now, the nice thing about this is I should be able to scroll down here and just kind of drag that down, and it should calculate the next one for me. And it's doing exactly what I want it to do, so I'm going to keep going down. And it calculated, no, it didn't calculate everything I wanted it to. Yeah, that's not right. We're going to have to go back and do this again. So let me do this instead of saying 18, so I can make sure the right numbers there. We're going to actually just put the number in, 10.9375. There is a way to make it do what I wanted it to do, so it filled down at this point, but I'm not going to go searching for it right now. Let's go ahead and just drag down, and now we've got what we need. Okay, so that was taking the guess number, like right here, and subtracting the mean from that. Okay, so now we're going to do, the next thing we had to do is square these numbers here, because that's what it said to do on there. And so I'm going to do this. I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to put this, and I'm going to do a little caret, because that's how we do exponents, and I'm going to push squared. And so this is what I got. Okay, and so there's what I got. And now again, I can click on that, and then where that little box is in the lower right-hand corner, I can just drag that all the way down, and it will calculate the squared numbers for all of them. Okay, so the variation, remember, let's go back. The variation was the summation of all those squared numbers that we just got divided by the last ID number that we have, which is 16. The number of things we have, the number of numbers we're working with minus 1. All right, so we're basically finding the average. We're adding up all of these, and it's basically kind of like finding the average, not totally, because we have to square this. Okay, so we're finding the average of the squares. So we're adding all of those squared numbers up, and we're dividing by 1 less than the number of items we have. Okay, so let's go back to share that page. And so to do that, I'm going to again, I'm going to go back to I'm going to go to insert function, and I'm going to change this just a little bit, because I want to use most recently used, because I want to use the sum here. So I want it to equal the sum, because I want to add all those numbers up, the squared numbers, and I'm going to tell which ones I want. I want this one, and push the shift and click, and then until that's okay. So it's giving me a number, but I'm not done yet because remember I have to divide by, I'm going to divide by in my formula box, 1 less than the number of numbers that I have. So I have 16 numbers, so I need 1 less than that, so I'm dividing by 15. And now I can push enter, and I get a number. And that's my variance. Okay. To do the standard deviation, all I have to do is take the number, the variance number, and take the square root of it. Okay. So I'm going to push that. No, excuse me. I'm going to push that. I want to go to equals. So I need to put the formula into that box. Equals, and I'm going to do this. And one of the things that we have found out is that square root is also the 1/2 power. So I'm going to put parentheses, 1/2, and then I'm going to enter that. And so my standard deviation is about 5.39. So the difference of the length with that is about 5.39, or it's actually about 5.4. Now, there are buttons to help us figure that out without having to go through all this, but you need to know how to do both ways. And think about both ways, because sometimes if you can look at the data and actually see the numbers. Sometimes you need the extra help. So let's do the variance. Let's go to our insert function. We're going to go to our statistics category. We're going to find where it says variance. Okay, let's try this. I want from here to here. And it came out a little bit different. Let's figure this out. Let's see which one I have to do here. I think I chose the wrong one. Uh-oh. Okay, let me go back here. Let's get rid of this. Okay, so we're going to again choose variance. And choose the ones we want. Okay, that's the one I wanted. So it was variation. When we did it, it was the second one with the variation. Yeah, variation S, you can see at the top here. Okay, in the formula bar. So make sure you choose the correct one. It was the second one. And then the next thing you can do is you can again insert function. And I know I scrolled right past it before. You probably didn't see it, but there is one that's called standard deviation. And we're going to choose that one. OK. And we tell it which numbers we want. Don't forget to hold the shift button down as you're clicking on the last one. And we get that. So they were both have the S at the end of them. They're VAR with an S and STDEV for standard deviation with the S. Okay. So we've got those ways of doing things. Now, going back to here, we calculated the variance. We found the mean. We calculated, we took the numbers that we found. We subtracted the mean from those numbers. We squared those numbers. And we calculated the summation of the whole thing and divided by 1 less than the number of data sets we're working with, or data pieces we're working with. we said that standard deviation, all you do is take the variance and take the square root of that. Okay, and which we did. Again, if you need to pause to kind of write some of these things down, go ahead and do that, and then push play when you're ready to move on. And then we've used the spreadsheet to do that, and we found both the standard deviation button as well as figuring out how to do it by hand. The last thing we need to know is frequency. So as we look at our, go back and look at our spreadsheet, we want to know how often or how many numbers are in the data set. So if we're looking at numbers, I'm going to put something off to the side here so you can see it. If we're looking at the numbers from 0 through 5, how many times does the number 0 through 5 occur? And that would be then 6 through 10. And that's not what I wanted. It thinks it's a date, and it's not a date. Okay. See if it'll. Let's try it again. All right. Okay, and this is going to need to be text also. And then we can do numbers 11 through 15, and then we can do numbers. Make sure I get that correct. Numbers 16 through 20. So basically, all you're doing on those is you're going through your guess numbers, and you're counting up how many numbers you have between 0 and 5. So we're looking at that. We got 4 and 5. So next to that, we can just tell it the frequency is the number 2. It's 2 because there are 2 numbers in that number range. Then 6 through 10, I can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for counting. For 11 through 15, I'm going to go over to my guess number, and I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for my 16 through 20, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. So I can actually count that. Now there is a button under the formula that will help you count those. And I'm actually not going to show it to you. I'm going to see if you can figure it out, how to get the button, find the button, and how to make it count the numbers, how many 0 through 5 you have, and 6 through 10. Then I will give you some extra credit on the test when you have to do that. Okay? So that's something that you'll, again, see if you can get some extra credit by figuring out how to make it count. I will expect it to be done once by hand and then once with buttons, however, just like we talked about before. Okay? So that is it for the lesson today. Hopefully you've learned something about spreadsheets and how to make spreadsheets work to help you out in terms of calculating things. And hopefully it'll make it a little easier for you when we have to calculate some of the other items, like on your tests and things like that. But also you can use this in a lot of ways out in the real world that are very helpful and beneficial. But you do have to know how to put the formulas into it to make it work for you, because if you don't know how to put the formulas into it, then it won't calculate for something. It won't calculate what you need, because those little magic formulas that I showed you, where you click the button, they don't have those for every single thing you need or might want to have happen here. So that's really important that you do that, because this can be very powerful, very helpful, whether it's putting data, using data, whether it's getting information about people, about comments and things like that, whether it's using it for just keeping your checkbook balanced. You can do it for that. There's lots of things you can use this for in the real world to help things be a little more efficient. But there aren't necessarily little buttons to push to give you the formula. You have to sometimes know how to make the formula work yourself. So with that, we are wrapping this up. Hopefully you have a good rest of the day, whatever time you're watching this. And again, make sure you've got good quality Cornell notes so you can compare it to the rubric under doc sharing. And we are done.